All right. Guys, we're getting there. Amish. Right, in less than 2 weeks. I think, right? Yeah. 13, 14 days we're done. All right. All right. Hooah. Let's hold on to our heads. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Kuf Mem Dalid. We left off on Daf Kuf Mem Dalid Amid Aleph on the top line in the Amid, towards the end of the line Omar Lohen. We're going to have to recap what we began in the Perek of Chavis. First of all, we have been learning that there are 3 categories of fruits when we're speaking about their juices. You have Zeisim Va'anovim, that are primarily grown for their juices. Then you have on the other side Sha'ar Peiros, which are generally dafka not grown for the juices, but they are grown for them to be consumed. And then you have this middle category known as Tusim, Vinimoinim, mulberries, berries, and pomegranates. It is in this category that we began yesterday, Omar Rabba, Omar Rav Yehuda, Omar Shmuel, that where is there a machlokes in our Mishnah between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim, only in the category of Tusim V'Rimoinim. What are we speaking about? If juices oozed out by themselves from fruits on Shabbos, based on the rule that we are not allowed to squeeze juices out of the fruit, that's called schita, that's connected to mafarek, which is connected to dash. We are extracting one thing from within another thing, juice from within food. So even though in our Mishnah, it appeared that the Chachamim say that you never may drink that juice because they are afraid that if you'll drink it, you might squeeze it. And in our Mishnah, it appears that Rabbi Yehuda is always lenient by saying, no, it depends. If the person prior to Shabbos had designated those fruits for mashkin, then he's moida. That if the juices oozed out on their own, we are afraid, since anyways you designated this for their juices, if you can drink the oozed out by themselves, you might squeeze out more. But Rabbi Yehuda is lenient by saying that if the person prior to Shabbos designated those fruits le'oicholin, even though juices oozed out on Shabbos, you are allowed to have it l'kulam. So we learned that Amar Rabbi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, that the machlokes between the Mishnah, between the Tanoim, is only in the category of Tusim and Imoinim. L'kula Alma said Rabbi that by Zeisim and Anovim, even Rabbi Yehuda is machmer. That means even though you designated them lo'icholin, no, most people designate them lamashkin. When you see the juices, you might change your mind and you might squeeze them. You may never have it. And then he said another chiddush, right? The Rabbi Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, that by Shar Peiros, the Chachamim are moide to Rabbi Yehuda lekula, that if you designated those fruits for consumption and juices oozed out on their own, then you are allowed to have those juices. The only area where they have the machlokes is by Tusim va'anovim. Okay, then we went on, guys, let's halt up, and we brought out, and we were asking, what's the source? Where do we know that's from? So we quoted the Braisa. And in the Braisa, when the Braisa is speaking about Tusim and Nemoinim, the Braisa added the nuance that no one spoke about yet, and that is, what happens if you have Tusim v'Nemoinim that are stam? Not that prior to Shabbos you designated them lo'icholin, nor you designated lamashkin, So when we are quoting the leniency of Rabbi Yehuda, so the Braisa limits the leniency. When does Rabbi Yehuda say that juices that came out on their own are allowed to be consumed on Shabbos? Only if you bedafka designated tusim and emoinim lo'oicholin. If stam, like if you designated lamashkin, there Rabbi Yehuda is going to be machmer and he won't allow you to have the juices that oozed out on their own. So the Braisa that we learned on Amid Beis puts together stam to mashkin. Okay, and on that's where we left off. The Gemara is challenging this from a Mishnah in Masechtas Machshirim. Now, the Mishnah Masechtas Machshirim is discussing a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim regarding milk. What milk? When we speak about milk as one of the 7 liquids that is considered mashkin, and therefore it has the koyach to be machshir something else, to be merkabel tuma. So when it comes to chalev isha, Likula alma, whether it left a woman's body l'rotzain or shaloi l'rotzain, it always has the status of chalav. No one debates that. The machlokes we have in the Mishnah is what happens if you have chalev behema, but it left the animal shaloi l'rotzain of the owner. It oozed out of the animal. Then over there, the Rabbi Akiva's machmer, he says that this milk is mashkin, and the chachamim, they're lenient. Now, that's where we're going to go. We're going to review the back and forth, but I just want to finish recapping. Just that's where we're up to. We're going to go back and forth, and we're going to further clarify and actually substantiate the statement of Rabba Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel that indeed, the machlokes in our Mishnah is only by Tusim and Emoinim. By Zeisim and Anavim, Rabbi Yehuda is moide to the Chumrah of the Chachamim, and by Shar Peiris, the Chachamim are moide to the Kula, to the exception of Rabbi Yehuda. And then on Kuf Mem Daled Amid Beis, we're going to introduce something very important, which is Mamash Negeh Halacha L'Maisa, that the definition of Dash, which becomes Mefarek, right, threshing, which gives birth to a tulda of extracting, which is why you can't do schita, right? Why can't you squeeze fruit? Because you're extracting the liquid from the food. What's the definition of extracting? When you are taking one category of item from within another category. In our case, liquid from food. If that which you are extracting halachically is considered food, food from food is not called extracting. You're not extracting. It's like when you're cutting a piece of steak. You're taking food from food. And that will all lead us into the leniency that we'll have in the Gemara, which is also that if you were to squeeze a fruit directly into a kedera, directly into food, so the liquid that's coming out of the peda is becoming part of the food in the pot, so it's never going to be categorized as mashkin, and therefore you will be allowed to squeeze it on Shabbos. That's Shabbos Kuf Mem Daled Amid Beis. Now we're going to be speaking because of that about some laws of mikvahs. We're going to be speaking about some laws of Hesed, Zav, right? That a Zav has this unique chumrah, that if the Zav is supporting someone else's weight, that becomes tamei. So for example, a Zav is not allowed to milk, or if the Zav milks something in the week, that milk will become tamei, because as he's taking the milk out of the udder and he's directing the stream of the udder, we view the milk to be resting in the hand of the Zav. Okay, and many other details, but that's basically the Daf Kuf Mem Daled. So let me go into the details again, reviewing the Mishnah and Machshirim. Chalev Isha, always called mashkin. Bein, it left a woman's body l'ratzin, bein shaloi l'ratzin. Chalev behema, machlokes Rabbi Akiva's machmir. Let's remember this, and the chachamim are mekel. L'ratzin, mashkin. If it left the animal shaloi l'ratzin, so then the chachamim say it's not tummy. So let's review the back and forth. So Rabbi Akiva tells the chachamim, doesn't make sense. What is Bechlal considered more mashkin? Before we get into halacha, Chalev Isha, only infants drink. Chalev Behema, everyone drinks. So if this is Bechlal viewed as a beverage, it would make sense that it's always halachically a mashkin that can be machshin, even if it left Shaloi L'Ratzin. That's Rabbi Akiva's first challenge to the Chacham, to which the Chachamim responded, that was the last thing we learned yesterday. No, that since milk comes from dam, right? We're quoting Shitas Rabbi Meir, dam nekor, then asachalav, And let's analyze the difference between dam from a human being versus dam from an animal vis-a-vis the dinim of machshir, the dam being a mashkin, to be machshir something to be mekabel tuma, which is amazing. Dam from a behema is considered a liquid only if it is dam halalim, in the sense of when you shechted the animal, when the animal is dying, if it's dam hanefesh, that dam is considered a liquid. But if dam maggei fasa, that means if an animal is wounded, that blood is not considered halachically a mashkin. So therefore the Chachamim argue milk that comes from the dam in the behema, just like the dam of an animal is not always going to be metame, neither is the milk. Yeah, if the milk left l'ratzain, we have a pasuk that calls milk mashkin, but we can say sheloi l'ratzain not. Rabbi Akiva, that's a challenge. Masha Enke, when it comes to dam, being the dam of a person, no one argues that. Not only is the dam that leaves a corpse, the dam hanefesh metame mamish, but dam magei fasa means if a person is wounded, they get a knack on their hand or on their foot, and some blood oozes out. That is considered dam. That if it touches produce, it's going to be machsharit. So therefore, the Chachamim argue chalav of an isha is always going to be considered a mashkin, bein l'ratzin, bein sheloi l'ratzin, but chalav from an animal should be more lenient. That's where we're up to. So Amar Lahem, guys, the last words on Daf Kuf Mem Daled on the top. So Rabbi Akiva has to defend himself. Right? Rabbi Akiva is saying no. Rabbi Akiva is saying that chalav behema should be chamur, always tummy. Rabbi Akiva tells the Chachamim, don't tell me that that since chalav comes from dam, it should follow the rules of dam, and taka dam from a behema is less mashkin, let's word it that way, than dam from a person, but chalav is bechlal more chamur than dam. So yeah, dam of a behema, if it's magei fasa, is not mashkin, but chalav should be, because chalav is more chamur than dam. Where do we see that chalav is more chamur when it comes to the laws of mashkin than dam? It from an animal. If an animal, it has too much milk in them, and for the benefit of that, not that you need the milk, the udders are too filled with milk, so you're milking the animal for the refuah of the mother. The din is tamei. That chalav is called mashkin. That's called l'ratzin. Not that you wanted the milk, but you did it with knowledge to heal the animal. Masha ein kain hamekis l'refuah or hamakis l'refuah. Again, we're speaking about an animal. An animal, just like they used to do very commonly, they used to bloodlet for people, for therapy. Animals also. You have so many mishnayos about it. Hamakas l'refuah, the din is tahar. So that's a gewaldige rebuttal. So yeah, chalav comes from dam, but before the din that we're discussing over here, you see in other areas that chalav is more mashkin than dam by the animal. So again, the Chachamim say that chalav of a behema should be Rabbi Akiva, that's Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva tells the Chachamim, chalav of an animal should always be tamei, which is a shita, bein l'ratzin, bein sheloi l'ratzin. Dam takich bin moed, dam magei fasa of a behema star, but the chalav should always be tamei. So amrulai, so the Chachamim respond to Rabbi Akiva. Again, the Chachamim are the lenient ones, and now is the link. Salei zeisim va'amavim yechichu, the laws of anavim, zeisim and anavim in a basket will back up our shita, the shita of the Chachamim, that if milk left an animal, shaloi l'ratzain, it's not mashkin, it's not machshir, meaning it's not metamim. What's the din of salei zeisim anavim? Shamashkin hayoytzim mehem l'ratzain. And guys, we're not speaking about Hilchos Shabbos. We're speaking in a machshir about Hilchos Tumah. All right. So what did we mention? We mentioned from the 7 liquids, yad, shachad, dam. One of them is shemen. One of them is yayin. Both of them. So what happens if mashkin ooze out by themselves from these zeisim and anavim? The din is that l'ratzain, they're tummy. Shaloi l'ratzain, if the owner did not want for them to ooze out liquid, so the din is that they are tahor. Okay, all of this is the Chachamim trying to differentiate that, just like we find by zeisim va'anavim, that the ratzain will determine whether what leaves it is considered mashkin. Sheloi l'ratzain, and no one is debating that, is not called mashkin. Okay, so therefore the Chachamim say by milk of a cow, chalev behema, or of an animal, of a goat, any kosher species from milk we can consume, that milk only l'ratzain is considered mashkin and not. Okay, but what do we see from Machshirin? That when is oil and wine considered mashkin? When is it considered mashkin? And that's key, because for you to be violating schita, we have to view it as mashkin. Only if it left l'ratzain. And now, says the Gemara, my love, that l'ratzain means you want them. Sheloi l'ratzain also includes bistama. Now, of course, the Gemara is going to respond by taking away this presumption. But let's now go with this havamina that sheloi l'ratzain includes bistama. And on this, the Mishnah Machshirin, that the Chachamim are using it, that bistama, by bistama, it's not mashkin. So now the Gemara has a gavaldik question. Don't forget, let's appreciate again, we made all of the juices from fruits into three categories. Zeisam va'anavim, beneath it tusim and imayim, and beneath it sha'ar peiros. We were speaking about tusim and imayim, but now we're going to have a kal v'chaimer. And that is, Uma Zeisim Ba'anavim. As we said, right, Rabbi, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, that everyone considers them b'nei schitaninu. Nevertheless, Shaloi l'ratzain v'loi klum. And again, meaning that it's not considered a beverage, and we're putting stam together with Shaloi l'ratzain. So for sure, Tusim v'rimainim, that to begin with, the la b'nei schitaninu, right? Like we mentioned, it's an in-between category. So for sure, that's a Gavaldik Kasha. Now hold on. Who said that this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda? So we're going to learn a Rashi inside. Rashi points out that Mimanav Shach the Kasha stands. If the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, here's the Kasha. And if the Mishnah is the Chachamim, you have a bigger Kasha. And we'll read the Rashi inside. The Rashi really says, you can use this to challenge on Zeisim and Amoinim itself. But let's read the Rashi inside. So the three lines before the end of the narrow lines. Shaloi l'ratzain, that's the presumption, that's the base of the kasha, also includes the stomach. And it says, Tohaidim, what is the Mishnah Machshirim speaking about? Tohaidim means it's not considered a mashkin. Now this is mamish negeh to schita. And again, we're going to learn, like we mentioned in the intro, the moment we don't view the juices, mashkin, b'chlal, it's not a problem. Okay? Even b'stam, Tohaidim, the loy chashiv mashkin. Now Rashi speaks out the kasha more. He says, okay, now who is the author of the Mishnah? We don't know. But let's work it out. If the author is Rabbi Yehuda, Ka'amar Lei, Hasoshen HaKasha. If stama is included in Shaloi l'ratzain, so here we see that stama is not mashkin. And the Baraisa explicitly said in Rabbi Yehuda that stam is mashkin. However, maybe it's the Rabbanan. So Rashi says Gavaldi, so it's even worse. So the kasha is even better. On the first wide line in Rashi under the Gemara, so then Kolshchein, that they should be taught according to Rabbi Yehuda, right? Because Rabbi Yehuda is more lenient. The Rabbanan Mashke, the Sol Sugya, even if we limit the Machlekes as Rabba did, fine. But still, the Chachamim say that Mashkin that oozes out from Tusim V'Ramayim are always tummy, are always not allowed to be consumed. It's Mashkin. The Chachamim are more machmir. Machmir means they consider the juices mashkin more than Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, either the Rabbanan mashkul, Rabbi Yehuda lav mashkahu. So the kolshchein, neither that the Rabbanan is lav mashke, which is the presumption of stama. So the Rabbi Yehuda for sure should not be mashke. And bahashto ma zeisim ba'anavim. So that's the kasha. So now Rashi points out, you know something? Hold on. We spoke out the chazir the sugya, that by Zeisim and Anavim, we begin that everyone is Moedim. That if liquids left it, even Shaloi l'ratzain, everyone is Moedim that you cannot consume it on Shabbos. Even if you designated it Lamashkin. So this also contradicts it. Taka does. Says Rashi, right? That Moedim Rabbi Yehuda, the Af, the Lo'oicholin, even if you designated it Lo'oicholin, the juices that leave are considered mashkin. And here we're saying, no, that juices that leave Zeisim V'Anavim from the baskets are not mashkin. Guys, if it would not be, it's not mashkin for Hilchas Tumah, then it should not be mashkin for Hilchas Shabbos. And then you should be allowed to consume it. And Enechanami, we could have asked that question also. Hello, like shuye. This is even a bigger question. Because since Tusim and Imoinim are on one notch even lower, so the contradiction between the Mishnah and Machshirin and the Baraisa that we learned is the sharpest. It's the greatest contrast when you show how by Zaysim and Anovim, Stam is like Shaloi L'Ratzoin, not Mashkin. And by Tusim and Imoinim, Stam, what Rabbi Yehuda's Mashkin, Minakotza Lakotza, that's the kasha. Back inside the Gemara. Answers the Gemara. As Loi. Okay, that kasha was based on the premise that stam is shaloi l'ratzain. No. L'ratzain means b'stama. Stam, the juices that ooze out are mashkin. Fits. Shaloi l'ratzain. All right. L'ratzain includes b'stama. Shaloi l'ratzain means the goli adate the omar loy nichali. Okay. So then you took off the whole kasha goes away, and the boy is saying, "Oh, I'll give you a better answer." Don't confuse the Mishnah and the Baraisa. And there's one huge difference. The Mishnah and Machshirin that we just quoted, right, the final rebuttal of the Chachamim, is speaking about baskets. Baskets are perforated, right? They're woven. There are holes in them. That means that liquids that fall out get lost. Is the Charaya, you don't want it. Stam, you don't want it. Because if you would have wanted the liquids, you wouldn't have put it in a basket. The sugya that we're learning about, the Baraisa, is speaking about other utensils that don't have holes in them. They don't have holes in them. Why did you put it in such a container? Fakir, because it's megale that the owner is thinking that if juices ooze out, I want the juices. And the moment you want the mashkin, that's the holy sin here in Shabbos that we are afraid. Since you have them and you want them, you might squeeze more. Beautiful. Let's read it inside. Shani the Mishnah Saleh, that's the key. The baskets. They're baskets. So the owner knows that if juices will ooze out, they're going to get lost. Is the Haraya which is why Stam is take like Shaloi L'Ratzon. Meaning Stam, it's not Mashkin. The Braisa that puts stam with mashkin is because it's in a non-perforated container. Okay. So Atkan, my friends, we proved from the Brais, remember L'chitishkach, go find it. This chiddush that Rabbi Yehuda is moide to the Chachamim that by Zaysim and Anovim, even if the person designated the Zaysim and Anovim for foods, if liquids oozed out on Shabbos, Rabbi Yehuda will be machmer like the Chachamim, and he will say that midrabanan you can't have it, because you might end up squeezing it by yourself. But the other statement of Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, that what? That the Moidelei Rabbanon, the Moidelei Rabbi Yehuda, that the Chachamim is Rabbi Yehuda, by Shar Peiros, that they are lenient like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning that if you did not designate this, if you designated these Shar Peiros for Eichalin, and juices oozed out, the Chachamim will be moided to Rabbi Yehuda that you are allowed to drink it, because you're not going to squeeze it because you prior to Shabbos designated this to be consumed. How do we know that? Minolan. So we also prove it from a Braisa. The Tanya says the Braisa soichatin we may lechatchila squeeze daf kufman dalad on the days befigin plums uve ferishin quinces uve uz rodin sorb apples. Right, these are other fruits. These are the sha'ar peiros. You are allowed, you're listening, you are allowed to squeeze them on Shabbos. Now this is, as we spoke out in our intro, that what's the issue of squeezing a fruit, right? We're calling this schita. So it's not schita malabin. We're speaking about juices of a fruit. Schita is connected to mefarek, right, which is called extracting, which is a tool of dash. What is the definition of extracting? Extracting doesn't mean you take out something from within something else. That's not enough. You're taking out one type from within another type. I'll give you a mashal, kernels. Kernels is food, right? You're taking it out from the chaff. Chaff is not food. So when you take out food from within non-food, two different minim, that's called mefarik, that's dash. So since the Tana is holding that juices that come out of other sharpators, which people don't use for juices. People don't drink them. That's the way we're going to learn pshat now. So it will never have a category of mashkin, but it's something. So what are you going to call this halachically? You called it food. What are the food? Oichel mitoich oichel is not called mefarek. What's the problem? Reminding the avada zeisem and anavim. Nobody has to debate that. Like we mentioned, zeisem and anavim. Avada the zeisem is a fruit. The oil and the wine is a mashkin, and that's mamish. That's your midah biblical schita. Mefarek told the dash. Reminding is in between place. Some people eat them. Some people have reminding for their juices. If you take out juice, it is mashkin, and then you're violating. Then you're violating mefarek. Now, what's the raya that the Braisa brings that remainim are also designated for liquids? Because the shell based Menashe Bar Menachem, that mishpacham, the household of Menashe Bar Menachem, hoyasoichatem b'remainim, is a raya that what that remainim is also designated for liquids. Now, how does this prove that Rachachamim amoidet Rabbi Yehuda? Because Madach, one is allowed to deliberately squeeze. For Jews, you are allowed to deliberately squeeze. So for sure, if juice is oozed out on their own, why can't you drink it? What was the whole Mishnah? You can't drink it because you might end up squeezing it. Squeeze gesundheit. That's the way we're learning pshat. Now, the way we're learning pshat, it's coming out that even if you squeeze it for juice, kilu, then it's not called mashkin. We're going to challenge that in a moment. We're going to challenge that understanding in a moment. Says the Gemara, okay, you're right. I got the madach. Get madach, you can do it lachatchila. If it happened by itself, you can drink it. But who told you that the author of this Braisa is the Rabbanan? Maybe the author of this Braisa is Rabbi Yehuda. Answers the Gemara, even if the author is Rabbi Yehuda, the Te'evin Rabbi Yehuda, aim the Shamas Leil Rabbi Yehuda, that Yatsu Ma'atzma. The machlokes in the Mishnah was only about Yatsu Ma'atzma, between the Chachamim, however you want to limit it, the way Rabbi limited it, Tusam and Amayim. But they spoke about liquids that came out on their own. Whether you can juice, whether you can squeeze fruits out on Shabbos, Mishamatle, we never heard of machlokes. There is no machlokes. Elamai Yislach Lamemer. Even if the author is Rabbi Yehuda, we don't find any place that the Chachamim argue with this. This concept that something that is halachically lav b'nei schitaninu, which is sha'ar peiros, and on this we are saying that you can lechatchila squeeze it. So afilo tema rabbanon, kiven the lav b'nei schitaninu, afilo lechatchila shmamino rabbanon ishmamino. The Chachamim will not disagree with this. Again, they only disagree when something is b'nei schita. Elama, you didn't squeeze it, it oozed out on its own. You have to be machmer. Rabbi Yehuda sometimes says you can be lenient if you designate it la'achila, but no one is debating this. Okay, so now basically we learned the Gavaldik Chiddush, that even if you are squeezing out this plum, since halachically the lav b'nei schita ninu, which means that what comes out of it will never be classified as mashkin. So if you are extracting non-mashkin, so what is it? If it's not mashkin, what is it? It's food. Food from food, even though the liquid food is within, but it's not a different type, it's not mefarek, even on the rabbinic level, and you can lechatchila do it. And we're going to see, not everyone subscribes to this way of understanding it, but let's now begin from the following angle. We learned in the Braisa that what was his raya that avoloi b'rimoinim, that rimoinim may not be squeezed out on Shabbos, because the Braisa says, "Shall base Menashe Bar Menachem hoyasechnem b'rimoinim." As I state in the Braisa. And on that, Omar Rav Nachman, halacha kishel base Menashe Bar Menachem. Indeed, this is the halacha. Now, he didn't say the halacha is like this Tanach. He says the halacha is like that family. So Amalei Rava to Rav Nachman, I don't understand. Menashe Menachem is a Tanach. He didn't give any. He's not a Tanach. He didn't. He wasn't asked a shaila. He didn't give up sakdin. During the week, that mishpacha had a minute that they would have pomegranate juice, right? So why are you saying that we paskin like Menashe Bar Menachem? Elama, what must it mean? No, we paskin like this Braisa, and why? But why do we paskin like this Braisa? Because he brought a proof. Because the Shavuot Kishal Menashe Bar Menachem, that's the reason why the money may not be squeezed. And who did he bring it from? Not from a minig of at least a certain area, from a minig of one family. So the question is, can a minig of one family determine the halachic status of a product? It doesn't make sense. As the Gemara verbalizes the question, Menashe ben Menachem have a ruba da alma. B'chlal we say many times, batla daiton. So I may look, the Tanach would have says that b'rimonim you may not squeeze because many people, or like we have been learning, it's a middle category. Not many people, at least a substantial amount of some people. But the Baraisa only quotes one family. So why should that be relevant? So the Gemara says, no, that's the whole point in that for this, it is relevant. One is enough. What's the proof? The Tanach says in a Mishnah in Kalayim. Now, guys, remember that Kalayim, Kilei Akedem, means planting with vines. Zroim. Zroim means vegetables. Zroim means grains. Zroim means herbs. One is allowed to plant fruit trees together with vineyards. So now the question will be regarding koitzim. Koitzim is like a bush that's not growing anything. There's no fruits on it, right? It's a thorn bush, but it's not an herb. It's not a vegetable. It's not a grain. I know it's not producing anything, but if it's going to be classified as a tree, then you should be allowed to plant it in a keren. If you're going to classify this koitzim tree as a herb or as a vegetable, right, then you will not be allowed to plant it in a keren. And there's a machlokes tanoim. Hamakayim koitzim bekeren. You have this thorn bush, and you didn't plant it because who wants a thorn bush? Let's begin with that. But if it's there and you're not uprooting it, Rabbi Lazar holds that this is kiddush. The fact that you're not uprooting it, you're keeping it there, kiddush in the negative sense, it makes it holy means you may not eat from the vines, from the grapes, because it's a klei akadem. It's being planted with another product that's not considered a elon. However, the Chachamim Oimrim ain't a mekadosh, Elo davar shekamayim mekayim. What will be considered a product that's going to passel the kedem? Something that everyone plans to keep. Even if you individually decided to keep the thorn bush, but ladaitoi, it's garnished, and if it's nothing, it cannot be mekadosh. Now, the Omar Rab Chanina, my Talmud Rabbi Lazar, why is it kiddush? So he answers, you're right that most people don't maintain a thorn bush. However, in Arabia, which is a country, mekaymin koitzei sados ligmaleim, since gemalim eat koitzim, and there are many gemalim there, so for them it's chashuv. And he's also not putting it in the category of an elon, but being that it's something chashuv that's not an elon, it's going to be kiddush. So what do we see from over there? That even though ruba da alma don't maintain a thorn bush, since in one location it's done, it halachically changes the status l'chumra and kiddush. So therefore, it makes sense that since Beis Menashe Bar Menachem, they would use pomegranates for juice, so that's enough to qualify that which leaves from these rimonim as mashkin, and therefore it's considered schita mefarek dosh. What kind of proof do you have from there? Mida iria. At least I know it's not Ruba da Alma, but it's our country. Arabia is Asra. It's a location. Here you're quoting one family, Beis Menashe. Ella is a whole different way of understanding this whole topic, and this is very important. That even if most people, 99.9 people, don't grow this fruit for its juices, right? No one has a plum for its juice. If you are squeezing it for juice, for you it's juice. And therefore, not for the alma, for you, because you're taking it out for the juice. And therefore, you are not allowed to do it on Shabbos. Because if for you it's mashkin, the moment you're taking mashkin out of oichlin, that is mefarik. So how do you understand the Braisa? When the Braisa is saying that you can lechatchila be shoichet, figin, prishim, uzdarim. So Rabbi Chizda explains, Elahainu taimon, and really, and this is also Hainu taimon of Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman paskins like this. Rabbi Chizda, the Rabbi Chizda, the first wide line. Let's look inside the Rashi. Right before we go to the first line in Gemara, Rashi is just 2-3 lines above this. In this height, first of all, yes, batla daitoi. Make that clear. So when we're speaking about plums, since the majority of the people don't, or when it remind them any fruit, if the rave of the people don't juice them for juices, it's not called mashkin. Nevertheless, when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, even the achshav ihu, if I squeeze something, I'm taking a melon, right? And I'm squeezing it for juice, even if no one does it. Nevertheless, hava l'didei mashke. And you know what? I'm not allowed to do it on Shabbos. However, but the brayse that we quoted that says clearly that soichaten lechatchila befigin or beperishim. What is the brayse referring to? Is that you're squeezing it not because you want the juice, but for some reason, that's the way it works, that when you remove some of the liquid from that peta, it makes the fruit sweeter. Gewaldig. So Ruba de Alma don't ever have plum juice then. It was not grown for plum juice. And even if you are doing it, batla daita for the oilam, well, how do we view someone who's juicing a fruit to make the fruit sweeter? That's the topic of the brayso. You're doing it lamate kaperi, the loyal tzayda chamashka. And since no one grows pig and prishim uzdarim for their juices, when you are doing it lamate kaperi, you can lechatchila do it. That which leaves is not called mashkin. And now let's read Rashi weiter. And what's the loy b'rimaynim? Aba loy b'rimaynim. Meaning, vafilu lamatkan. If you are squeezing the juice out of rimaynim, not for the mashkin, you want to sweeten the rimayn, that is asur. Why is that asur? Because since there's one person that squeezes rimaynim b'choil for juice, even though you're not doing it, but that's already more than shar peiros. Hilkach b'Shabbos asur afilu lamatek. Hoyel ve'ika chad ovid l'shem mashke. The loy mishum de menashiru b'da alma. Elo chayshinon I shodes le'lamatek asur l'mevel l'shem mashke. Oh, very good. So it's gewaldig. So this is a very important Rashi. Normally you say batla daitoi. Here it's not so precious to say batla daitoi because of, like we mentioned, if no one in the world uses this product for juice, if I'm squeezing it for juice, for me, I violated Shabbos. Because I'm making it into a mashkin. Topic of the baraisa is you're squeezing it out lamate kaperi. And the reason why by Yerimain I may not squeeze it lamate kaperi is because once I'm squeezing it, I might change my mind and decide to do it for mashkin. Why would I change my mind by Yerimain and not change my mind for pigin? So that is enough one person. If one family in the world, Taka lechatchila uses Yerimain for mashkin, that heightens the chashash. I'm squeezing it anyway. Lamate kaperi. I might squeeze it lamashkin, and therefore it's asur. And let's go back into the Gemara. The first white line. Now we're jumping from Shabbos to mikveh. Beets, sheschoton that were squeezed. Unasan and the mikveh, and the beet juice was placed in the mikveh, and it's very dark. It's very red. So it changed the appearance of the mishka of the mikvah. So says Rabbi Chizda, as is the rule, right? When it comes to, let's say ma'im shuvim, you need to have shlosh lugin with all the other pratim. If something changes the appearance of the mikvah, even if it's a minute amount, it passes the mikvah. And says the Gemara, again, most people did not. Borscht, I know we eat borscht, but you eat borscht with the peta, not only the juice. So it's not considered mashkin. And the the premise is that only mashkin can passel the mikvah. That even though the whole world doesn't squeeze juice out of beets, lemashkin. But if I did it, one person for me, havalahu mashkin. And since for me it's mashke, if my borscht went into the mikvah, it passes the mikvah. Hachinami, coming back to the limitation of learning the brayso. It's not a heter you can squeeze a plum. No, if you're squeezing the plum for mashkin, you're not allowed to do that. Because for you, it's mashkin. And as we learned in Rashi, the whole Braisa is speaking about people squeezing the pigin, squeezing the Ramayim only lamate kaperi. That is where you have the difference. If it's lamashkin, anything that you squeeze lamashkin is going to become a prohibition of mefarik. Now, that's the way, by the way, Rabbi Chizda's Raya is based on a premise that why would beet juice poisel the mikvah? Because it changed the appearance, it's only if it's mashkin. So that's his Raya. You see that beets, even though no one squeezes the beets just for the Jews, if you did it, it's mashkin for you. Rav Papa disagrees with that. Rav Papa says, don't bring any Raya that if I squeeze something for me, no matter what, it's called mashkin from the case of the mikvah. Rav Papa Amar, no. Maybe if no one else squeezes that product for its juice, halachically, it's never mashkin. Still, it passes the mikvah. Can you make a mikvah from beet juice? No. And there's a rule that the whole davar she'ein oisem memenu mikvah lechatchila poisel mikvah b'shinoi madem. So therefore, there's no raya at all from Teradin. And Papa is arguing that if no one squeezes something for its juice, and you do it, even for you, batla daitoi, which is a very important machlekes, and a very negeh halacha lamaisa machlekes. Again, if you're squeezing a fruit, you are doing it lamashkin, according to Rav Papa. If no one else does it lamashkin, batla daitoi. And if batla daitoi, then what you are extracting is not called mashkin. And if what you're taking out of the fruit is not halachically mashkin, you are not violating schita. You're not doing mefarik or mefarik, because mefarik is a tulda of dash, and dash is a kernel from shaft, food from non-food, two different types. One is within the other. But food from food, if you take a piece of bread from inside the crust, you're not doing an act of extracting bread from bread, food from food. Okay. Let's learn more dinim about mikvahs. If inside a mikvah falls wine or vinegar or moichal, now very importantly, there are three types of moichals. Moichal means some sort of olive water. That means there are juices that leave the olive that don't halachically have the label of shemen. They're very watery and they're called moichal. And very importantly, Rashi writes, we can learn the end of the first wide line under the Gemara. Right, it's a small daf. We can learn more Rashis, which is a good thing. Ugimol minim yeshboy. It's very important to understand the next few lines. 3 times that juices leave the zayis, and it's not shemen, and it's called moichal. First time is kishotoyanon mitchila b'ma'aton. As we spoke out, that when you gather the olives, you want to get them softer before you put them in the bud. And the way you make olives soft is simply you gather them in a vat and they sit there for a while. So the ma'aton is the first that vat. So when you gather them in the beginning, in order, because you want them to get cooked, means they warm up. Ulis basho, right? Ulis basho me'aleim, they get, so to say, heated up by themselves. Moichal zov mehen, a juice that we call moichal oozes from them. Bohu, that's the first moichal. Solul kamayim, it's mamish water, it's transparent. That's moichal number 1. Then, ula'achash am yomim, after it sits in this ma'aton for a few days, the dachaku zeh, they're pressing against each other. This, the second juice is already thicker. Moichal number 2. Then you take the olives and you put them in the press. And then when you squeeze it, that's called shemen. But after you squeeze it, then, says Rashi, you would take a pile of the residue, of the remains of the olives, and you would put them in akolim, in nets. And when they're sitting in those nets, a third time more juice oozes from them, and that's the third moichal. Now we'll see exactly what this tanan, what this mikvah mikvah is referring to. So back inside the Mishnah. So if in a mikvah falls wine, vinegar, or moichal, and that's the key v'shina marov, it's possible. Now guys, we just learned the machlekes in the Gemara. What passes the mikvah? Only shinoi mara from something that you can't make a mikvah from, or does it have to be a mashkin? So as we have a machlekes before, we'll have a similar machlekes over here. In other words, when we're saying that Michael also, if it changes the mikvah with color, it passes the mikvah, is it because Michael is a mashkin, or I don't need for Michael to be a mashkin? So now says the Gemara, man of the Michael mashkin. Well, the premise of the kasha is like Rab Chizda's proof from the Turadin. Even if something is going to change the appearance of the color of the water in the mikvah, it has to be mashkin to passel it. So if Michael passes it b'shinemara, is the charai that Michael is mashke. So says Abaya, not everyone subscribes to that. And therefore he's limiting the authorship of the Mishnah Mikvahs. Amar Abaya, Rabbi Yaakov, the Tanya, Braisa, Rabbi Yaakov says, Michael is like mashkin. Umay tam amru Michael ayitze batchila tar. If it's mashkin, then even Rabbi Yaakov is Maida from the three categories of Michael, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, the first one that we mentioned, the one that's solul kamayim, even he holds that it's taka not mashkin, doesn't have a din of mashkin, it doesn't make things susceptible to becoming tamei, it cannot become tamei. That's an exception. The owner Bechal never wanted it. He never wanted it. It doesn't serve any benefit. There's so little oil in there, people don't even enjoy it. Much better had it stayed inside the olives. So that's the exception. Rab Shimon Aimer, this is all the Baraisa. No, Michael is not mashkin. However, even Rab Shimon, that leaves the number 3. Why is that? Even according to Rab Shimon, yes, mashkin. Tamei means it could become tamei, and it's considered oil to be one of the 7 mashkin that it can be machshir or something else. So even Rab Shimon is moida. The third category, the fisha there's for sure going to be a little bit of residue of oil in that third moichal, because as we mentioned, you already pressed the olives. When you press the olives, the squeezing of the olives is what extracts the oil. Some of that oil still remained inside, and that is what oozed out. And the difference, obviously, between Rabbi Yaakov and Rab Shimon is category number 2. The number 2, the one the asen itzatsta, the one that oozes out of the olives after they're pressured together. That means that you didn't put them in the vat now, but they were there for a couple of days, and that second category is where you have the machlokas. All of this, the fact that Abaya said that the authorship of the Mishnah Mikvahs is Rabbi Yaakov, who holds that Michael is mashka, is similar, like to Rab Chizda, that will hold that in order for something to passel the mikvah, it's not enough that it changed the color. It has to be mashkin. However, Rabbi says, like we have Rav Papa, I disagree with you. I will argue that everyone will agree to the Mishnah Mikvahs. Don't limit it to Rabbi Yaakov. Yes, according to Rav Shimon, Michael is not mashkin. Still, it passes the mikvah. Rabbi Amar, Mishum, the mikvah, even though it's not called mashkin, and there's a rule that anything from which you can't make a mikvah, if it enters the mikvah and it changed the appearance, or place less on mikvah, the shinui madem. And let's come back now to Hilchos Shabbos. So what was the big chiddush that we learned here? Let's go Aldi. It's really a definition of mefarik or of mefarik, but this is now going to further shed light on our topic, which is squeezing fruits. If what leaves the fruit is not called mashkin, according to everyone, if it's not called mashkin, then lechatchila you can squeeze it out, because you're not doing an act of mefarik. You are extracting, like I mentioned. Open up a piece of bread, and you like the soft bread. You don't like the crust. If you take that out, you're extracting? No, because bread from bread. It has to be 2 different categories. Mashkin from Oichlin. So therefore, now let's go weiter. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Soichet Adam Eshkol Shalanavim. A person is allowed lechatchila to take a cluster of grapes and to squeeze them right inside a kedera. Inside a kedera means in food, because it's coming from food. It's going straight into food. It will never be called mashkin. And again, if it's not mashkin, you can do it. But not in a bowl. In a bowl means if you're not doing it direct into food, even if you're going to take that which is in the bowl and then put it in the food, that's not good. It has to go straight into food, right? Or today, the lemon, straight into the fish, There's even a machlekes.
Or the salad.
Straight into salad. The question is, if you want to put lemon into tea. Keminik, whoever has tea. So, tea is liquid. So they say, so I think Rav Moshe was the one that said, put the lemon onto a sugar cube. It's going directly into food. So the act then is not called mefarik. So now the sugar cube is saturated with, and then put it into the tea. I don't know if it's Rav Moshe that was matir or the machmir, but that's all connected to our sugya. The reason maybe you'll be machmir is because really you want it to go into the tea. This is like a harama, but maybe it works. Okay. The Medivrei Rabbeinu, right? The Rabbeinu here is Shmuel. By Shmuel Nilmad that Cholev Adam Eis L'Toicha Kedera. Guys, it's good to remember this. Why are we not allowed to milk an animal on Shabbos? We spoke about this many dafim ago, and even though there's a tzar v'lachaim involved, but we mentioned that Fruma farmers have a hefsid because they can't milk the animals on Shabbos. What's the issue of milking? Isur d'oraisa. What's the isur d'oraisa? That you are extracting milk, which is a liquid, from the animal. We're not going to call him an oichel when he's living, but it's liquid from a non-liquid. So based on this, now we have a solution how to be cholev and eis, and even to enjoy it. That if you put food, not mashkin, food under the udder, cholev adam eis l'toicha kedera, because then what's leaving the cow is not called milk. It's going straight into the food. And indeed, but not inside a bowl, not inside a pail. Taka, that's called mefarik. Alma, what do we see? Alma kosavar. Midivrei Rabbeinu nilmad. Alma kosavar. Mashke abolo oichel. I'm just curious, who made this statement of cholev adam eis? Midivrei Rabbeinu nilmad. Is it that he's learning this from the words of Shmuel? Or someone else made a statement that cholev adam is like. Someone said cholev, Rabbeinu made a statement that cholev adam is like. So Rav Chisda says from this statement, we see that he also subscribes to the same thing as Shmuel does. Mosiv Rami Bar Chama, gewaldig going being. Right? As we mentioned, there's a tumah of Zav in the intro called Hesed. It's a unique din. Now, normally, when we say that someone who's tamei is mitame, they're mitame by maga, they're metaga by masa, they're metaga by moving. Hesed Zav means that no movement, no direct contact, no carrying. If something had its weight leaned on, based on a Zav, that's already called Hesed Zav. So, so that says, Rabbi Bar Chama, it's quoting a Mishnah in Taharas. It says, Zav, shechoyla v'eis. If a Zav is going to milk a goat, the chalav is tamei. And why is that, my friends? Because when you milk an udder at a certain point, especially when you are directing the stream of the udder, we view the milk in the udder being leaned on, weighing on the hand of the Zav. So it's Hesed Zav. So fine, we're not debating. The din that Hesed Zav imparts tuma has nothing to do with oichel and mashkin. Good, even an object, anything, right? Hesed Zav. But hold on, for foods to become tamei, that the rule is first they have to become muchshir lekabel tuma. Now we don't say that by mashkin. Mashkin don't have to become muchshir because they're mashkin. But now that we are establishing for Hilchos Shabbos, that if you have milk that's going straight into a pot, it never has a category of mashkin, so we'll call this oichlin. Oichlin have to become muchshir lekabel tuma. True, there is Hesed Zav, what a great question, but what was machshir, the oichlin, this milk, for it to become tamei? So how can a Mishnah write a cross-the-board rule that Zav shechoyla v'so'eis achalav tamei? At least the Mishnah should have limited itself. That's only if he's milking the A's inside a kara, inside a pail, inside a bucket, not inside food. Answers the Gemara, no. That just like the Amar Rabbi Yochanan elsewhere, regarding tipa hameluchleches al pi hadad, that whenever there is some milk that is purposefully, when the milk begins to leave a woman, she's going to smear the first drop around that area to make it easier then for the baby to suckle. And hachinami, the way you milk an animal is betipa hameluchleches al pi hadad. At first, that's the way it works. When you milk a behemoth, the first drop, you're going to smear on the opening of the udder. And that taka facilitates the milking. That is not going into the ketera. That first drop has a din of mashkin, which is gavaldik. And therefore, there is, and all of the milk, which is oichlin, that's leaving, is having contact with that first drop of mashkin, which is mamash moiradik. In other words, we spoke yesterday about the concept of dam necher v'nasa, this is hapcha, that we all want inspiration. We all need inspiration. We all need a sarusa de la'ela. The ikid is our avoida. Tichbad avoida aleim. True. Milking, work. But in the beginning, you know what makes avoida easy? If you have one drop of chalav, which is a sapcha, which is what we, when we're zoicha, if God gives us a little bit of a geshmak in something, as I sarusa de la'ela, this inspires us to do our avoida much better. And that's the way they used to milk izim. And that's the way, even when you milk a goat inside kedera and a hatak is called oichlin, the Mishnah will still say that if a zav did it, it all becomes tamei gavaldi. To be continued. Great.
But what if they don't do the first tipa?
Then it will not become tamei.
The tipa srucha then.
If you do it inside food,
Rabbi,
you don't know that. Many places can consider orange juice in the oranges in the category of zaysim and anovim. Mamish. Tshuva's written about this.
is there Indian in today's day and age to bring a proof from nations or countries? We brought before about the camels chewing the thorns from Arabia. There's no shaykhis to Yiddishkeit.
Carry the pekelach on their head. They had that before in Shabbos a while back. Sure. Remember carrying shaloi kadark. Remember that Anshe Hutzal carry on their head. There, the Gemara said, just because they carried on their head, it's still called shaloi kadarka. Here we're saying no. Here we're saying that Arabia. Here we're saying that since Bnei Arabia they grow thorn bushes. Thorn bushes is considered a plant. It's considered a plant. It's mekadesh.
No, but you're bringing a proof. You're bringing a proof from a country that has no shaykhis to Yiddishkeit that never did. Is it some today's?
Twice was by Bnei Hutzal. I should have said this. By Bnei Hutzal, Tosfos asks from our Gemara today. By Bnei Hutzal, we say that even if I carry on my head, it's called shaloi kadarkoi. Because the Gemara says just Bnei Hutzal is not Ruba Alma. Gemara said that. Here we're quoting from Arabia. So Tosfos gives a Gavaldic answer. Tosfos says, if you would go to Hutzal, a Yid, would you carry peklach on your head? No. You wouldn't do it. So just because they do it. If you would live in Arabia and you would have camels, you would grow thorn bushes. That's the Gavaldic Gemara of Tosfos. No, it's not that going that in certain areas this is needed for food. That's called the minik. That's a good chilik.
By the way, that might be connected to the discussion about quinoa and Pesach. I remember reading they had a whole thing as to whether quinoa is the main grain. Here in America, it was never looked at as a grain, but in the countries where it comes from, that was like the standard. That was like the wheat equivalent over there. So there was some sort of connection as to whether.
Yeah, but there are Yidden in those countries. There are Yidden in those countries.
No. It was in South America. What are you talking about? The Himalayas or whatever.
Ask Rabbi Zajac.
About what I would not know. If Danny would live in South America, he would know.
No, they're like in these Indian areas or whatever in South America. I don't know. Rabbi Tachlis, what's the story with if it's a juice that is normally not used for juicing, but you go and squeeze it? We're considering like the maskana. We're considering that juice.
Go with Rabbi, very good. For you, it's juice.
So whether it's beets or whether it's sorb apples, even though where it says that sorb apples is mutter, it's actually not mutter.
Yeah, it's only the Bryce is only. That was his chiddush. It's only when you're squeezing it lamate kapei. So we're not goizer. And by a rimoin, even if you're squeezing the rimoin only to make the rimoin taste better, even there it's usher. Because one family used to squeeze it for the juice. We are afraid that you will do so often. But I think people today, no, don't people today squeeze lemons on fish? People use this heter lachatchila. It's not called a heter, it's a normal.
Yeah, on Shabbos, a lot of people will do it with a salad, I think,
Thank you.
For sure.
Have a
That's
good
on
one.
the
I get